Hello. Hello. Good to see you guys. I'm looking at the book right now. I hadn't looked at how many pages there are today. Don't think we're going to make the whole chapter. Let's see. Good to have y'all here. Hi. Hope you're having a good Sunday. Okay, gotta switch. I gotta get new glasses. It's actually not my glasses, it's where the computer screen is from my face. My regular lenses, it's too close, and my bifocals, it's too far, unless I get real close. All right, emotion and the life force, 302 to 347. Oh, I think this is the longest chapter. I thought the last one was the longest chapter. Let's see, how long was that one? I thought last one was the longest chapter. 301. To, let's see, how long was that one? Because it took us, that was 276 to 301. So 25 pages. This one, holy moly, 47 minus 2, 45 pages. Holy crap. This is the biggest chapter we've done. 45 pages. Wow. You know what I see? A whole lot of BS coming forward. Wow. Because to fill that many pages about one chapter, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be interesting. Hi, Scooter Mom. Let's see. Yeah, we're definitely not going to be doing that whole. Yeah, I know. We're not. I think I'm going to start doing what I did the last couple days, Sundays, is I think when we hit an hour and a half, if we're not involved in like a very, important part, or we're having a discussion, we can discuss after an hour and a half. But I think at the hour and a half mark, that's it. I mean, as far as the reading of the chapter. So however far we get in that amount of time, I think that's a good rule of thumb. I think any longer than that is just hard to deal with, even for me. So how's everyone doing? So I slept late this morning. Yeah. Yeah. Screw mom, yeah. Yeah. We've gone longer than that, but I think the couple times we went the 2 hours, we were really in discussions too. Like that one chapter, I went that long when I did the history of Dianetics. Still tired, trouble getting to sleep. Oh, I finally actually got some sleep. Like the whole last week, every time I went to sleep, either within an hour and a half, the dogs woke me up. I woke up. I never got a decent strength. Well, having a little bit to drink last night relaxed me enough, and I was tired. My daughter messaged me, and we live chatted for a little while after the last night, and then I went to bed. But I wake up when my husband comes home in the morning, so I wake up for a while, and then I fell back to sleep for like a nap. I woke up at 1:30. I didn't put an alarm. It was like, whoo, because I didn't want to oversleep, miss Dianetics. So yeah, I always give it a few minutes to anybody new. So let people come on and get the notifications and all. I was having sleep issues all week too, but it was restless legs. It happened again last night and this morning. I luckily don't have, that's like the only thing I haven't had trouble with is restless legs. My legs hurt. I sleep in the fetal position. I've always done that. I could literally put a stack of books at the foot of my bed where I sleep, and they'll still be there the next day. So my hamstrings will hurt because they're folded up a lot. I have to try to stretch. But so I started taking lysine, And I think one of the benefits of lysine is for restless legs. I remember it because my husband has it a little bit. Oh, cool. Incineration Nation. Is that what you are called? That's cool. That's cool. Let's see. Benefits of lysine. Let's see. Calcium absorption, collagen boost, diabetes, immune boosting, wound healing, anxiety, hypertension. I have like most of this. Muscle strength, osteoporosis, some others. Promotes healthy skin. Schizophrenia. That one was stress. Boosts athletic performance. Insulin resistance. Reducing inflammation. Regulating hormones. I swear I saw restless legs. Maybe it was another supplement because I was looking up a lot of them a couple weeks ago when I was ordering them. What supplements help restless leg? Vitamin C, D, and E. Okay, so maybe this is vitamin C I was looking up. Sorry about that. I'm glad I looked it up. You know how I can't remember things. So, where'd my other glasses go? I lost them. No. There they are. Can't go far. I'm on a chase. Oh. Yeah. Irish Mart became a member at 4 a.m. this morning. I saw that. That was cool. I appreciate it. I am thinking about I don't expect anybody to ever want to be the higher levels. And I just came up with the Texas idea. So it's yellow rose. Lone Star, yellow rose, Longhorn, Texas Longhorn, and Texas Ranger. I think the Texas Longhorn could be changed. If y'all have a good idea. We have blue bonnets. So I did the yellow rose of Texas. Blue bonnets is our state flower. I think I'll change it to blue because I have a lot more. Texas Longhorn is a cow, is a steer. Texas Ranger, you can be either way, but I feel like, but then again, I do have a lot of women in my demographic. So I'll think on that. I think Texas Longhorn is kind of weird, but I've made them up really quick. All right. Oop, I got a bug on my screen. Hold on. It's on you, Scooter Mom. Oop, got it. Whoops. It was on that message. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. We've been here 8 minutes because I know a lot of people probably don't watch this live or even watch the whole thing, which is fine. Any of you that can hang for this, you deserve a medal. So, like I said, it's a long chapter. It's 45 pages. That may take 3 days, to be honest with you. So I'm going to try to read fast. It's called Emotion and the Life Force. I have no idea what we're going to get into. Blue Monets is pretty cool. Yeah, I think I might change it. But then again, I think, because I don't think anybody's going to go that high. It's just for fun. So the first two is maybe I could Lone Star, because everybody's Lone Star. That's the first level. I should have made that one the yellow rose. But it's still pretty cool. My home county in Wexford, and we're called Yellow Bellies. Yeah, if you don't know, the Yellow Rose of Texas is a song. It's been around for ages. And of course, Lone Star we're called the Lone Star State. So you got the Lone Star State, you got the Yellow Rose of Texas, you got the Texas Longhorns. If you've never seen them, they're those ones that have the horns that come way out and then curl like this. And then, of course, Texas Rangers. I think a lot of people know what that is. All right, moving on. Emotion and the Life Force. Let's see. I read the first chapter last week. One of the largest roles in therapy is played by emotion. In the second book, we covered this subject and divided it tentatively as a theory only into 3 divisions: A. The emotions contained in the command of engrams, whereby physical pain became confused with emotions. Which, of course, we know this is just his made up BS. I mean, I don't doubt that having emotional pain can cause your body to react. One of my therapists told me that was true. I'm going to hit my biotin real quick. Hold on. Because there's a book, I haven't read it yet, that she told me to get. That's called When the Body Says No. So like if you're highly stressed or anxiety or depression or any trauma, your body is going to react. So I mean, we found out that's actually true. He said engrams are in the cells, but he talks about them being in the cells and having memory to conception. So he takes that. And this was 1950. Well, I was watching Nora's channel a while back, and she was showing this woman who studied Holocaust survivors and their children and grandchildren. And she found a gene that they had because of the Holocaust survivors' trauma. Now, she told the scientific community, look, I found it. I don't know what to do with it. That's up to you. If we can come up with screenings of people when they're young to see if they have this gene, then maybe we can, get to it quickly so that they don't have problems their whole life. That's a bonus. So I had to give L. Ron Hubbard a little bit of kudos there because he actually got that right, even though we know he was making it up. So they call it generational trauma. So generational trauma, and I know I've passed it on from my childhood. I tried to break the cycle. I didn't want to be like my mother or her mother, but it was still there. I still had issues. I was better, but I hope that my daughter is better, but I know I probably passed that on. So I thought it was that the gene had been changed. Maybe it is. I could have that wrong. Maybe that was true. You know how I am with details. Sometimes, unless I hear it over and over again, sometimes, and I try to say, yeah, I do believe in generational trauma. Well, plus, I mean, even if it's not a gene, you're in the household with that person, and that person is going to have an effect on you. So even though I tried to be better, I had a lot of anger issues until I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety and it took me years to get on the right med and everything. So, people have said, oh, you look like you're a nice person. Nah, everybody has issues. Nobody's perfect. I'm not. My daughter's not, but she's trying to do her best as a single mom. And so hopefully we can break that chain. Totally raised in a household with that. A lot of us have been. A lot. And we're seeing that in all the chats and stuff. And that's why I think we feel such a connection with the survivors of Scientology and why we want to help, why we want to better understand what caused them that trauma. And hopefully, they can better understand. And it helps us understand better how to help them get out or escape or what they need to hear. There's a lot. That's why the biggest reason I do this. Irish Mart was there. Adam, I forget his last name, but the funny Adam, he's funny. He called me what was it? The best reverse Dianeticist. I said I was going to steal that. So I never knew I would get this much out of it, to be honest. Oh, right glasses. I thought it was going to be dry reading and boring, but there has been moments where we've figured out, really understood what makes Scientologists tick, what L. Ron Hubbard has done to them. So, all right, we got to get moving. This is a long chapter. So I'll try to check comments periodically. I'm going to read faster and try not to stop too much. Yeah, he is both smart and funny, Adam. Yeah, he is. Okay, so we were at A, the three divisions. A, the emotions contained in the command of engrams, whereby physical pain became confused with emotions. B, the emotions contained as endocrine reactions, subject to the analytical mind of the clear and the analytical mind and reactive mind of the Abari. And C, the emotions contained in engrams, which bound up free units of life force. He may have talked about life force before. This is enough pages. I hope he explains what he means by that. I know he said things like, I'm sure he always explains everything. I'm not even going to bother. He will explain it, probably to the nth degree. Further work and research on emotion will undoubtedly bring about an even closer understanding of it, but we have a workable knowledge of emotion now. We can use what we know and produce results with it. When we know more, we shall be able to produce much better results, but just now we can produce the release and the clear. If we treat emotion as bound up life force, and if we follow these general precepts to release it, we shall obtain a very large gain in any pre-clear. Indeed, we shall produce our largest single gains by so releasing emotion. In an engineering science like Dianetics, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that. An engineering science like Dianetics, we can work on a push-button basis. We know that throwing a switch will stop a motor, that closing it again will start it, and that no matter how many times we open or close that switch, our motor will stop or start. We are using here a force which is still as mysterious to us as electricity was to James Clerk Maxwell. Much earlier, Benjamin Franklin had observed that electricity existed and had done some interesting things with it. But he had not used it much and he could not control it. A philosopher like Bergson selected out a thing he called elan vital, a life force. Man is alive. There must be a force or flow of something which keeps him alive. When man is dead, there is no force or flow. This is life force in the Benjamin Franklin stage. As he considered electricity, so did Bergson consider life force. Now we are up in Dianetics to the James Clerk Maxwell stage, or very nearly. We know that certain equations can be made about life force, and we can use those equations. And we can theorize that life force and what has been called a certain kind of emotion are either similar or the same thing. We may have the wrong theory, but so might James Clerk Maxwell. Indeed, Maxwell's theories may still be wrong. At least we have electric lights. In Dianetics, we are pretty certain that the majority of tenets are parallels of natural law. There are the big computations. We are not certain that we have emotion properly bracketed, but then we shall not be sure until we have actually taken a dead man and pumped him up with life force again. Short of this extreme, we are on solid ground with emotion as life force. We can, for instance, take a girl, examine something of her background with, let us say, an electroencephalograph, an instrument for measuring nervous impulses and reactions. I think I was tested with that once because I had nerve damage in my arm, my shoulder. We can, for instance, I read that. And then proceed on the basis of information so obtained to do one of two things. The first is inhuman and would not be done, of course, but she could be made sick or insane merely by using this data so obtained. If the data is obtained in therapy, it is obtained by actual contact with engrams, and an engram contacted in reverie has lost its power to aberrate. Dianetic therapy, thus, makes such an eventuality utterly impossible. The second and far more important fact to us is that she can be made to recover, with this same data, all the force, interest, persistence, and tenacity to life, and all the physical and mental well-being possible. If it could not be made to work both ways, we would not have an answer, at least in workable form. Some fiction writer, by the way, if tempted to horrorize on the first fact, must please recall that the data was obtained with apparatus which would have staggered Dr. Frankenstein for intricacy and skill in use, and that Dianetic therapy contacts the data at source. The apparatus is necessary to keep from touching the source. For the instant the source is touched by therapy, its power vanishes like yesterday's headlines. So let's have no gaslight plays about Dianetics. Wow. Please, they'd be technically inaccurate. So, oh, yeah. So, actually, again, I read that within the mind of being a never in. And what I heard, because he said, oh, we wouldn't, if you take that, you could use it to your own devices, I think is what he was saying. And I think that's exactly what they do in Scientology. They may be doing the right thing in auditing, maybe, like really trying to make this stuff go well. But outside of auditing, in the atmosphere of Scientology, especially, usually when I say Scientology, I'm usually picturing Sea Org and staff. Public get a little bit different treatment. So, because Sea Org and staff are there 80 to 100 hours a week. They're in this environment. And in that environment, no one is allowed to be kind. It's high stress. It can be traumatizing. They're allowed to beat on people and not get in trouble for it. How is that healthy? So they're causing, outside of auditing, they're causing trauma, and they're constantly re-stimulating trauma all day long with the stress of trying to get all these stats done and doing the right thing and never questioning what they're doing, or being able to look at outside internet, TV, or books. So they're insulated in this environment that constantly causes them trauma, and that which makes part of their brain shut down. He explained it earlier in this book that when you're constantly re-stimulated, it can shut down part of your brain, make you kind of zombie-like, and not have your own thoughts, and you're easily controlled. We know he was actually writing that as his manifesto, not this is what I'm going to fix. So we know when he's saying these things that he's going to do the opposite. He may be trying to get them to do the right thing in auditing to make at least people in public that go to auditing maybe think they got somewhere with it. But we know that in the general environment of Scientology is the opposite. So that's what, in other words, he learned another thing. He probably studied this a little bit, these people he's talking about, but then he uses that information to his own devices. That's, if he would have, even though he was making stuff up, if he would have stuck to trying to help people and not trying to control people and make money, this could have probably been really revolutionary. Not for real, but the people that were reading this, I just read that and thought, that sounds kind of cool. Maybe that's something I'd be interested in if I wasn't a never-in and didn't know what I knew. If I had read that, what we just read, on my own, or I went to a Dianetics center, that might make sense. So he does make sense a lot of times, but he doesn't actually do what he says he's going to do. That's the problem. He used all of that knowledge for his own purposes. And that's why he died a very messed up in the mind person. All right, let's keep going. Get a drink since. Oh, hi, Marco. I'm surprised you're awake. Oh, it's evening time. That's why. Oh, I get so dry when I'm reading. Alrighty, let's move on. If you're new, this is a 45-page chapter. It's the longest one. We will not be finishing. I'm just going to go to the hour-and-a-half mark, and we're just going to stop there as far as reading. All right. So, he said the information can be used to make someone sick. And that's what I was listening to myself. And I can't believe he said gaslight. Okay, so we're down here now. Oh, American Throwball. I've never heard it called that. That is cool. That is neat. All right. This is not as simple as electricity in that the switch cannot be turned off and on. So far as Dianetics is concerned, it can only be turned on. We have a rheostat, an electrical instrument used to control current by varying resistance. Okay. We have a rheostat, then, which will not drop back, but which, when pressed forward, releases more and more dynamic force into the individual and gives him more and more control over its use. Man is intended to be a self-determined organism. That is to say that as long as he can make evaluations of his data without artificial compulsions or repressions, held down sevens in an adding machine. Okay. He can operate to maximum efficiency. When man becomes exteriorly determined, which is to say, compelled to do or repressed from doing without his own rational consent, he becomes a push-button animal. It's an interesting sentence. He becomes a push-button animal. This push-button factor is so sharply defined that an auditor in therapy who discovers a key phrase in an engram and does not release it can use that phrase for a little while to make a patient cough or laugh or stop coughing or stop laughing at the auditor's will. In the case of the auditor, because he got the data at source, contacted the engram itself, which robbed it of some power, the push button will not last very long, certainly less than 200 or 300 pushes. The whole pain drive effort at handling human beings and most of the data accumulated in the past by various schools has been unwittingly this push button material. If the engram is not touched at source, it is good for endless use, its power never diminishing. Touched at source, however, the original recording has been reached and so it loses its power. The handling of human beings and what people have been calling roughly psychology have been actually push button handling of a person's aberrational phrases and sounds. Children discover them in their parents and use them with a vengeance. The clerk discovers that his boss can't stand a full wastebasket and so always has one full. Okay. The bosun on a ship finds out one of his sailors cringes every time he hears the phrase fancy pants, and no one uses the words to intimidate the man. This is push-button warfare amongst aborigines. Wives may find that certain words make the husband wince, or make him angry, or make him refrain from doing something, and so they use push buttons. The husbands find their wives push buttons and keep them from buying clothes or using the car. This defensive and offensive dueling amongst aborigines is occasioned by push button reacting against push buttons. Whole populaces are handled by their push button responses. Advertising learns about push buttons and uses them in such things as body odor or constipation. And in the entertainment field and the songwriting field, push buttons are pushed in whole racks and batteries to produce aberrated responses. Pornography appeals to people who have pornographic push buttons. Porn and games government appeals to people who have care for me push buttons and others. It might be said that there is no necessity to appeal to reason when there are so many push buttons around. I also noticed this guy doesn't have a very high opinion of people because he acts like everybody finds somebody's buttons to push. By the way, he took a term that we just use and made it a whole part of this scientific Dianetics. He thinks everybody really does that. I think most of us are better than that. We're not going to purposely push somebody's buttons. I mean, we would just be sitting around trying to think of the meanest stuff we can do to somebody. I mean, to get somebody to not buy clothes. I mean, he does not have a very high opinion of people. Most people don't sit around doing that with their spouse or family or friends. But I can see how they do it in Scientology. It's another way to control people with their, it almost is like, auditing is to find somebody's push buttons so they can use them. I can feel my IQ dropping with every word. Hey, Drop Short Media, good to have you. Good to have you. Yeah, but we have learned a lot about what L. Ron Hubbard takes this information that he studied and came up with, and he uses this against members. And so we have better understand, even though, yeah, it's a hard read sometimes, but I better understand why members are scared to death to go to the doctor, scared to death of people outside Scientology, and can become easily controlled. It's not a weakness, and they're not unintelligent. Somebody just found out how to re-stimulate their trauma and keep them in this state where they will do what they're told. Nope, I guess not. I think the time of day has something to do with it, and the title. Last night I just said late night chat. So somebody was sitting around in their board and thought, oh, let's go mess with these people. So I think I'm going to have less trolls in the middle of Sunday afternoon. So I could change it to subscribers only, but that was, I mean, look at how many times I've gone live from home. I'll just say from home because when I'm on the street, it's a little different. And I haven't had trolls, so the statistics are pretty good. That was unusual. I'm a terrible troll. Scooter is on standby to pounce on me. Their moms wouldn't give them internet access. Yeah. At the end of this, remind me of a story I have told, some of you may have heard, about how I tracked somebody down to their house when they threatened me on the internet. I'm a really good detective. Remind me at the end because I'll probably forget. Okay, let's move on. Hey, eyes to see. All right. Oh. If you just came on, he's actually talking about finding people's buttons and how people push them all the time. And by the way, I wanted to mention where he had to use pornography in his description. We could understand this without him going there. He always has to go there. He is way too wrapped up in that kind of stuff. All right. Okay. Where am I? Okay, I think I read some of this, but these same push buttons, because they are sevens held down by pain and emotion, false data forced into the computer by engrams, and every society has its own special patterns of engrams, also happen to drive people insane, make them ill, and generally raise havoc. The only push button the clear has is whatever his own computer, evaluating on his experience, which itself has been evaluated by the computer, tells him his survival conduct along his four dynamics. And so, being no marionette in the hands of careless or designing people, he remains well and sane. So he's saying a clear can stay sane even if somebody tries to push his buttons or the buttons are gone. Cricket's here. Susan. Okay, cool. All right. It is not true, however, that a clear is not emotional, that his reason is cold, and that he is a self-conscious puppet to his own computations. His computer works so rapidly and on so many levels, with so many of his computations going on simultaneously, but out of the sight of I, though I can examine any one of them he chooses, that his inversion or acute awareness of self is minimal. Inversion is the condition of the aberree whose poor computer is wrestling with heavy imponderables and held down sevens in his engram, such as, I must do it, I just have to do it, but no, I'd better change my mind. The computational difference between the clear and the aberree is very wide, but there is a much grander difference: life force. The dynamics have, evidently, so much potential force. This force manifests itself as tenacity to life, persistence in endeavor, vigor of thought, and act and ability to experience pleasure. The dynamics in a man's cells may be no stronger than those in a cat's cells, but the dynamics in the whole man are easily greater than those in any other animal. Assign this as one will, the man is basically more alive in that he has a more volatile response. By more alive is meant that his sentient emotional urge to live is greater than those found in other life forms. If this were not true, he would not now command the other kingdoms. Regardless of what a shark or a beaver does when threatened with final extinction, the shark and the beaver get short shrift when they encounter the dynamics of man. The shark gets worn as leather or eaten as vitamins, and the beaver decks a lady's back. Oh, like a coat. Okay, I get it. The fundamental aspect of this is seen in a single reaction. Oh, Nanstru's here. Thanks for dropping by. Awesome. Good to have you for a little while. I appreciate it. This is a long chapter, so I'm trying to read fast. All right. Oh, what I was thinking about this is he's saying a man's survival instinct is more than an animal's. I'm not so sure I agree with that totally, because we have many more things involved in our life, whereas I would think an animal, their only thought is to survive. Their whole entire being and everything they do is food, water, and not getting eaten by a bigger animal. That's it. So I kind of disagree a little bit, just a little, but with his analogy, that's all. But I get what he's trying to say. But I can also see why we need each other when we're doing this, because they had Dianetics centers and courses that they could take to better understand this book. We don't have that. So I could see with a Dianetics course and somebody explaining this in whatever they wanted you to figure out might be helpful. The fundamental aspect of this is seen in a single reaction. Animals are content to survive in their environments and seek to adjust themselves to those environments. That very dangerous animal, or God, man, has a slightly different idea. Ancient schools were fond of telling the poor demented Abari that he must face reality. This was optimum conduct, facing reality. Only it isn't man's optimum conduct. Just as these schools made the fundamental error of supposing that the Abari was unwilling to face his environment when he was actually, because of engrams, unable to face it. They supposed that the mere facing of reality would lead to sanity. Perhaps it does, but it does not lead to a victory of man over the elements and other forms. Man has something more. Some people call it creative imagination. Some call it this or some call it that. But whatever it is called, it adds up to the interesting fact that man is not content merely to face reality, as most other life forms are. Man makes reality face him. Meh, true. Propaganda about the necessity of facing reality, like propaganda to the effect that a man could be driven mad by a childhood delusion, whatever that is, he said that, does not face the reality that where the beaver down his ages of evolution built mud dams and keeps on building mud dams, man graduates in half a century from a stone and wood dam to make a mill wheel pond to structures like Grand Coulee Dam, and changes the whole and entire aspect of a respectable portion of nature's real estate from a desert to productive soil, from a flow of water to lightning bolts. It may not be as poetic as Rousseau desired. It may not be as pretty as some nature lover would desire, but it's a new reality. 2,000 years ago, the Chinese built a wall which would have been visible from the moon had anybody been up there to look. 3,000 years ago, he had North Africa green and fertile. 10,000 years ago, he was engaged upon some other project, but always he has been shaping things up pretty well to suit man. I found out recently that you can't see the Great Wall in space. I thought you could, but oh, sorry. Ooh, I hit the table. Sorry. Trying to stretch my legs. I'll have to check on that though. Make sure that's true. But this was 1950. So this was before we'd gone into space or even orbited. There's an extra quality at work, or perhaps just more of it, so much more of it that it looks like a new thing entirely. Now all this is not any great digression from therapy. It is stated here as an aspect of life force, where the individual finds himself possessed of less and less life force. He is losing some of the free units somewhere. And the free units of this life force in a society or an individual are the extra surge that is needed to tame North Africa, divide an atom, or reach the stars. Yeah, I'm not sure. Things on the internet. I think I heard that once, and it probably wasn't true. Although the Great Wall spans some 4,500 miles. Oh, wow, I didn't realize. It's constructed from materials that make it difficult to discern from space. The unglamorous truth is that the wall is only visible from low orbit under a specific set of weather and lighting conditions. Okay, so it can be, but it's hard. Okay, yeah, that makes a little more sense. Yeah, because it kind of blends. I think that's part of the issue is it blends in a bit. I never want to go there. I saw somebody talking about they went there, and the part that they let you go to as a tourist. Again, ask me if you're interested. Ask me at the end. I don't want to get off on a tangent. Yeah, some high vis paint. Yeah, that would work. Okay. The mechanical theory here, and recall it is but theory, and Dianetics can stand without it, is that there are so many units of force per individual. These units may be held in common by a group and may build to higher and higher numbers as enthusiasm increases, but for our purposes, we can consider that man as an individual or a society, both are organisms, has a ready number to hand for use in any given hour or day. He may manufacture these life units as required, and he may simply have a given supply. That is beside the point. What is to the point is that he can be considered at any hour or day as just so much alive. Consider this as his dynamic potential as we can see on our descriptic earlier. So, bye, Susan. Let me see if I read this right. There are so many units of force per individual. They can build higher and higher numbers as enthusiasm increases. So is he saying we're going to live longer if we have more life units? So let's see. He's probably going to explain it. So let's read on. What happens then to this dynamic potential in the Abari? He has a large quantity of engrams in his bank. We know that these engrams can sleep for his entire life without being keyed in. And we know that any or all of them can be keyed in and thereafter wait for restimulators in the environment to set them into action. We know that his necessity level can suddenly rise and surmount all these keyed in engrams. And we know that a high survival activity can bring him such a chance of pleasure that the engrams can stay unrestimulated, though keyed in. And we can suppose that these engrams, from one period of life to another, can actually key out again and stay out because of some vast change of environment or survival chances. That actually makes sense because knowing about trauma, we know that changing your environment can help your trauma response, can relax you. Like how on earlier we go and watch Eric Rader and listen to the waves on the beach and how that's very calming. That was my favorite part of going to South Padre Island, is just leaving the window open at night and listening to the waves. So he's saying that if you change your environment, you can be less restimulated. So we kind of already know this. The usual case, however, is that a few, and before I move on, but sadly, people stuck in Scientology can't do that. So they're stuck in that environment that's constantly restimulating their trauma. The unusual case, however, is that a few engrams stay keyed in continually and are restimulated rather chronically by the environment of the individual. He just said what I said. And that if he changes environment, the old may key out, but eventually new ones will key in. Most Abaris are in a state of chronic restimulation, which, on the average, starts the spiral dwindling down rather rapidly. As this pertains to life force, the mechanical action of an engram on being keyed in is to capture so many of these units of life force. Sudden and sweeping restimulation of the engram permits it to capture a great many more units of life force. In the average case, every restimulation captures a greater residue of life force and holds it. When enthusiasm or impetus aligns the purpose of the individual toward a true survival goal, as opposed to a pseudo goal in the engram, he recaptures some of these units. but the spiral is dwindling. He cannot capture back, except in very unusual circumstances, and as many as he has lost into the engram bank. Thus, it can be said, for purposes of this theory of life force action, that more and more life force units out of an individual's supply are captured and held in the engram bank. Here, they are perverted and used to counterfeit themselves as dynamic, as in the manic and the high euphoria case, and force action upon the somatic and analytical mind. In this engram bank, the life force units are not available as free feeling or for free action, but are used against the individual from within. So I thought he was going to go somewhere eventually, he might, and say that our life force, if we don't become clear, that I would think that your life would be shorter. That's what I'm seeing so far. I don't know what he's actually going to say. This is so interesting, at least to understand what's going on in Scientology. Yeah. It has really been an eye-opener. Trust me. Now, we understand, if you've read back, we understand why they're deathly afraid to go to the doctor. And now we understand why they're actually afraid to have children. And that's probably why many of them don't fight, Sea Org members fight being bused to the clinic. Because if they grew up reading this stuff, I'd be deathly afraid to have a baby. And they're afraid to go to the dentist or have surgery because when you're unconscious, anything anybody says or does while you're unconscious can cause you these engrams and these aberrations. So I couldn't imagine getting my wisdom teeth out without being under. But some have done that. So yeah, it's a lot of BS, but a lot of it isn't. It's not so much BS as he is laying out what causes people to be traumatized, and that he says he's going to fix it, but in reality, he's going to use that against you to control you. But they've also been brainwashed so much that even without the fears around children pregnancy, they are afraid to argue and talk back. Right. The control is big. And there's a better word for that. I just can't think of it. Yeah, he has really studied how to control someone, how to re-stimulate trauma, cause them trauma, but in a way that they don't realize it. And he studied. We know he studied. All right, where were we? Okay. Where was I? I need to start marking when I stop reading. I got a pen right here. You could remove your teeth like Tom Hanks does in Castaway. Effective but painful. Yeah. I'm about to have one removed tomorrow and get a crown. And I couldn't imagine doing that without Novocaine. Cool. But you got to do what you got to do. Okay, I read that. Okay, we haven't read this yet. We have demonstrated the parasitic quality of the demon circuits, which use pieces of the analytical mind and its processes. This parasitic quality is common to engrams in other ways. If a man has arbitrarily 1,000 units of life force, he has an ability to channel them, when clear, into highly zestful existence. In a manic state, with a pro-survival engram in full restimulation, the life force is directed through an aberrated command and gives him, let's say, 500 units of pseudo-dynamic thrust. I didn't know we were going to be doing math. I kind of get what he's trying to say. He's trying to say a zestful existence means you have more units of life force. None of us would ever call it that. Okay, so we could call it a zest for life. We've seen that in people. Oh, that person has a zest for life. They're happier. So if we look at it like that, I can kind of understand what he's trying to say. If we don't think of life force units and we think of happiness. So he's saying when clear, he has in a highly zestful existence, he could have 1,000 units. But if you're in a full restimulation through an aberrated command, you only have 500 units. So he's taking normal human existence that we all understand and know, the same word, that we all understand, and making it sound and breaking it down into something that he made up to make it sound that he broke into something else and that he understands human existence better. When this whole thing we just read is if you're happier, you don't have all that trauma in your life, or you can overcome it more, or you can just have a happy life. He took all these scientific things, or he took all these things that we normally do in our everyday life and turned it into something that is a scientific program, Dianetics, and that only he can help you because he broke it open and understands now all of life. I hope I'm explaining that right. In other words, the power is out of the same battery. Such an engram has, at best, less power than the whole organism, cleared, would have. This aspect of the manic or super personality neurotic has misled some of the old schools of mental healing into the thoroughly aberrated and poorly observed belief that insanities alone were responsible for man's ability to survive, a concept which can be disproven in the laboratory simply by clearing one of these manics and any other aberration. Right there. He's turning something he made up into this, like he has spent his whole life in scientific research, or somebody else has scientifically proven this stuff. When he just wrote a book. I mean, the guy's smart. He's just evil smart. The engram uses the same current, but perverts it, just as it uses the same analytical mind, but usurps it. Not only does the engram have no life of its own, but it is wasteful, as are so many parasites, of the life force of the host. It is thoroughly inefficient. If the comparable device were fitted into an electronic circuit, it would merely lead off and make unalterable some of the functions of the equipment, which should be left variable, and would in addition consume simply by lengthened leads and bad condensers and tubes power supply vital to the machine. We don't even use those components anymore, but we understand what he's trying to say. We don't use tubes. I don't even know if we use condensers anymore. I'm not that into electricity and machines. My husband would probably understand it. In the human mind, the engram assumes its most forceful assist aspect in the manic, channeling and commanding the organism into some activity of wild violence and monomanic concentration. Okay, monomanic. One who suffers from an obsession with one idea or interest. Okay. The super salesman, the violently buoyant Glad-hander. What's glad-hander? Glad hand. A hearty welcome, especially when insincere. Okay. The super salesman, the violently buoyant glad-hander, the fanatical and apparently unkillable religious zealot are classifiable as manic. Religious zealot could be L. Ron Hubbard. He's talking about himself. Probably doesn't even realize it. The abundance of power in these people, even when it is as grim as Torquemada's or as destructive as Genghis Khan's, is an object of admiration in many quarters. All right, who's Torquemada? Torquemada, Thomas Day, 1420 to 1498. Spanish Dominican monk, organized the Inquisition in Spain, became notorious for the severity of his judgments and the cruelty of his punishments. Okay, so I get it now. So he said, as grim as Torquemada's, the Inquisition, or as destructive as Genghis Khan's, in an object of admiration in many quarters. The manic, as will be later covered, is a pro-survival, assist, command, in an engram which yet fixes the individual on some certain course. But an engram is capable only of as much power as is present in the host, just as it is capable of tying up only as much analyzer as is present, your brain. So the engram is tying up your brain. So your trauma is tying up your brain. That's the way I look at it. Something keeps moving over here and it makes me think there's a new comment. I don't know what's going on over there. All right. Let us take a forceful manic who is displaying and functioning on 500 arbitrary units of life force. Let us assume that the entire being is possessed of 1,000 arbitrary units of life force. Suppose we have here an Alexander the Great. The dynamics of the average person are unassisted by manics in most cases, but are dispersed as a stream of electrons might be dispersed by a block before them. Here are scattered activity, scattered thoughts, uncomputable problems, lack of alignment. In such a person with 1,000 units present, 950 of those units could be so captured in the engram banks, your subconscious, and yet so thoroughly counteractive that the person displays a functioning capacity of only 50 units. In the case of Alexander the Great, it could be assumed the manic must have been an alignment in a general direction of his own basic purposes. His basic purpose is a strong regulator. The manic happens to align with it. A person of great ability and personal prowess becomes possessed of 500 units via a manic engram. Believes he is a god and goes out and conquers the known world. He was educated to believe he was a god. His manic engram said he was a god and had a holder in it. Okay, so now I understand more of what he means by manic engram. He did explain it. So a manic engram is like a psychosis or an aberration that you think you're a god or you're manic. So when you're manic and like a manic depressive, you have grandiose thoughts and you want to do all these big things, whether you can do them or not. So now because he kept saying manic so much, I wasn't quite picturing what he meant. Good luck fending off mania with a book. Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, yeah. But now I kind of understand more, but I'm still not quite understanding. So, is he saying that when you're manic, your life force units are tied up in your subconscious and you can't access them? Is that what he's trying to say? The life force units are kind of, I get it, but I don't. So is he saying that if you're manic and you have these grandiose ideas and your engrams have taken over, that you have less access to life force units? Does that mean, what does that mean? Does it mean you're like really more depressed, you don't have the zest for life, or that your actual life force, your life could be shorter, or both? Not quite I mean, I get he's saying they're tied up in the engram, but what does that mean as far as your outward, appearance or life, or how you're living it? Because I mean, and Alexander the Great, I have never watched the movie, so I don't know his ending. But I mean, well, I was about to say that his life was pretty good. He had a lot of money, but in reality, him and Genghis Khan were constantly worried all the time of conquering more and more and more, worrying about enemies. So I could see where a manic wouldn't actually be a very joyous existence. I read a book about, before they started calling it bipolar, I read a book about a manic depressive who was a doctor. It's called something about the fire, because at the time there was a grandmother who had custody of her kids, and I had home daycare, and I had her two grandkids. She's the one that turned me onto the book, and she was the most normal person I ever met. And then about a year in, the kids just didn't. It was summertime, so the kids didn't show up, and I didn't get a call or anything. And after a week, that took me down to just a couple kids. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to close my daycare, and I gave them plenty of notice. The couple that were left found out she had gone manic and not taken her meds, and was missing for 3 days and found in another state. And I'm like, that's how much your mind can take over your life. That your mania, bipolar, depression, whatever, can take over your life and make you do things that normally you wouldn't do. So I'm trying to figure out what he's trying to say here in that regard. I think he's trying to say, he's said before that being aberrated and being insane is all an engram, and it's all in your reactive mind, which we would call a subconscious. Our trauma can sit in our subconscious and not be there in the front all the time. So, but it can rear its ugly head. I know that from personal experience. I had the one and only worst panic attack I ever had in 91, and nothing bad was going on. I was in the middle of JCPenney at a mall, pushing my son in a stroller, and I was there an hour sitting on a bench, and the people in that department were helping me. I got the tunnel vision. I thought I was going to die, but my husband wasn't available. And it was probably something from a long time ago. So I understand how the subconscious and trauma can work. All right, let's go back to trying to figure this out. We got a few more minutes. Okay. Okay, we're talking about Alexander the Great thinking he was a god. Alexander conquered the world and died at 33. He could hold in his manic only so long as it could be obeyed. When it could no longer be obeyed, it changed his valence. He means personality when he says valence. He has to change words of everything. So I'm going to say the real word. He could only hold in his manic only so long as it could be obeyed. When it could no longer be obeyed, it changed his personality, became no more a manic, and drove him with pain into dispersed activities. The engram, which I just talked about, going manic, going off the reservation, it changed that person's personality completely. Okay. I thought that was a period, that was a comma. So it changed his balance, became no more a manic, and drove him with pain into dispersed activities. The engram received from his mother, of course, Olympias, can almost be read even at this late date. It must have said he would be a joyous God who would conquer all the world and must keep on conquering, that he must always strive to rise higher and higher. It was probably a ritual chant of some sort from his mother, who was a high priestess of Lesbos, Greek island in the Aegean Sea. The word lesbian derives from the ancient Greek name of this island. Uh, from the eroticism and homosexuality attributed to Sappho, ancient Greek poetess, and her followers. Really, I didn't know that. Learn something new every day. All right, who was a high priestess of Lesbos, and who must have received some injury just before the ritual. She hated her husband Philip. A son who would conquer all was the answer. Alexander may well have had 50 or 100 such assist engrams. The violent praying of a woman aberrated enough to murder. Thus, he could be assumed to have conquered until he could no longer stretch a line of supply for conquering, at which time he, of course, would no longer be able to obey the engram, and its force of pain would turn on him. The engrams dictated attack to conquer, and they enforced the command with pain once conquering could no longer be accomplished. The pain attacked Alexander. He realized one day he was dying. Within the week, he was dead, and at the height of his power, such on a very large scale, is a manic phrase in an engram at work. So, what I just said earlier, he's saying here that because he was manic, he had to conquer, and he wasn't actually that happy because he was too wrapped up in whatever trauma he was going through. And I think he is trying to say that it shortened his life force somehow. He's going to go into talking about it some more. Are you talking about that book by K. Redfield Jameson? I don't know that book. Maybe what you guys do. I've never watched the movie, and I know the gist of Alexander the Great. I didn't actually know how old he was when he died till just now. I did know his mother was very influential in his life. You know what I was also thinking here? LRH really understood manic depressive, schizophrenia. He really understood psychology. He could have done some really good work with that knowledge. I mean, using these examples actually made a lot of sense. It just saddens me that he used it for such evil purposes. I mean, they lost their first tax exempt status because he was getting too much money, too much cash from the church for personal use. That's all he was concerned about. And I think he was drunk on the power too. just like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan. Now let us suppose that Alexander, with only education to turn him against his father, with only prayers to ask him to conquer the world, not engrams, had been cleared. Answer: given a sufficient and rational reason, he would most certainly have been able to conquer the world, and at 80 might well have been alive to enjoy it. How can we assume this? What we just said. So he is saying that life force in an aberrated state and not a clear, that it can shorten your life. So I thought he might get there using the term life force. The manic with 500 units of directed purpose has been cleared. He now has 1,000 units of sentiently directed purpose. He is exactly twice as forceful as he was when he was in a forceful manic, and his basic purpose may be similar, but now can be realized and will not turn on him the moment he has reached a goal or failed. This is clinical, the theory behind life force. It was formulated in an effort to explain observed phenomena. The theory may be wrong, the observed data is not, but the theory must be somewhere close to right, because with it could be predicted considerable phenomena which had not been known to exist before. In other words, it is a profitable theory. It followed after Dianetics was well formulated. For a strange fact, vital to the therapist, turned up, the pre-clear advanced in therapy in exact ratio to the amount of emotional charge released from his reactive bank. The purpose and persistency of the aberree was hindered in ratio to the amount of emotional charge within his engram bank. His recovery of survival potential increased in ratio to the amount of energy freed from the engram bank. His health increased in ratio to the amount of energy freed from the engram bank. The engrams which contained the greatest discharge were those which centered around loss of imagined survival factors. Hence, this theory of life force was formulated. Any manic cleared seemed to demonstrate far more actual power and energy than before he was cleared, and any normal cleared increased in accessible life force units to compare with any manic cleared. Undoubtedly, further work and observation will refine this theory. At the present moment, however, it serves. It is one of those scientific theories thrown in to explain an operation or a long series of observations. In this case, it happens to be squarely aligned with the basic tenets of Dianetics. For it predicts data which can then be found and does not throw out former data predicted by the basic mathematics and philosophy of Dianetics. It happens to squarely align with the basic tenets of Dianetics. No, Dianetics squarely aligns with the psychology field. That's what it really means. He just took all of that and changed it. And that's why a lot of it does make sense. He took, what that he knew about psychology and turned it into Dianetics and used his own words, changed all the words and precepts and made it his own thing. That's why some of it does make sense. Here we are speaking actually not of this slippery term emotion, but we believe life force. This life force is considerably enhanced by success and pleasure in general, and is, according to this theory, augmented in terms of arbitrary units by pleasure. In other words, pleasure is a thing which recharges the batteries or permits them to be recharged, and in a clear, far from leading to softness, leads to renewed activity, since indolence is engramics. The unquiet mind. That was it. Thank you, Cricket. Thank you. Yes, that was it. I read that. I read that in the late 90s. Or no, I closed my daycare in 2003. So I read it in 2003. And it made a lot of sense. I really did I did understand why that person, what happened to her happened. And so many people that are bipolar, they used to call it manic depressive, because manic is you're really, really high, you want to do all these great things, and then you go really, really low. Go tell Daddy you want to go out. Let me text my hubby. I think he's awake. Okay. She will just sit here and stare at you till you try to figure out what she wants. Either snack, go out. All right. So, I mean, like I said, this does make a lot of sense, especially if you read The Unquiet Mind. That's a really good book, and it's not real long. It's not a very thick book. So if you're ever interested in understanding manic depression or bipolar, same thing, just different names. It really explains a lot, and it goes in cycles. So like for 2 months, you might be fine. And then for a month, you go manic. And then you go depressive. And then for 2 months, and it can literally be a timed cycle sometimes. Okay. It can be days, months, years. She is psychically communicating her wants to you. Okay. Where were we? Oh, Daisy. That didn't dawn on me. Yeah, that's what she does. It takes a lot for her to make noise. Now, okay, she's by the door. She wants to go out. I don't think Puppy's awake. She can wait a few more minutes. All right. Okay. Pleasure is a vitally important factor. Creative and constructive endeavor, the overcoming of not unknowable obstacles towards some goal. The contemplation of past goals reached, all combine to recharge life force. The person, for instance, who has been an enormous success and then loses that success and so becomes ill is following no rational cycle, but an engrammic command cycle. In a way, he has disobeyed an engrammic command, and having disobeyed, suffers pain. The child wonder who early burns out is actually, via therapy, about as burned out as a banked furnace. Any child wonder is a forced affair. Think of the dreams Mama must have poured through his engrams. So, pleasure is a vitally important factor, creative and constructive endeavor. But yet, he almost limits any pleasure or fun in Scientology. No off time, no fun time, nothing. She's hurt. Oh, I'll never forgive myself. If I have ruined my child, I will never forgive myself. My child, that's to be the world's greatest violinist. Or, oh, you brute, you have struck me. You have injured our child. I'll show you. I'll make him the greatest child pianist in all Brooklyn. He's to be a beautiful child, a wonder child. And you've struck him, you brute. Oh, I'm going to sit right here until you go away. Actual engrams, he said. The last computes that the way to get even with Papa is to be the greatest pianist in all Brooklyn. The child is a great success. musical ear, practice, and great purpose. He gets this engram restimulated constantly by his mother. But then one day he loses a contest. He knows suddenly he is no longer a child, that he has failed. His purpose wavers. He gets headaches, Papa's blow, and is at last neurotic and burned out. Cleared, he went back to being a pianist, not as an adjusted person, but one of the best paid concert pianists in Hollywood. Music aligned with basic purpose. Again, in another manic example, a patient who had been some time in therapy, not the first to do this by far, raved that he had been turned on by Dianetics. He was walking about a foot off the earth, chest punched out, and so forth. His glasses suddenly would not fit him. His eyes were too good. He was a beaming, powerful case of euphoria. Artificial restimulation had touched a manic engram, had brought it into key for the first time in his life. He felt wonderful. The auditor knew that he was due for a complete come down within 36 hours to 3 days, the usual time, because an artificial restimulation by therapy had tapped the engram. It happened that his grandmother had told her daughter that she must not abort the child because someday it might become a fine, upstanding man or beautiful woman. He was upstanding all right. It almost strained his back muscles. Another glance at the engram in therapy and the manic phase was gone. Again, he has got to be all on that. Every woman has thought about getting unaliving her child. I'm like, I swear, he thinks every single woman ever. Yeah, that is great that you guys got to read that together. I'll bet that helped a lot. Is that by the same author? Because I'll read it. Touched with Fire. Definitely. I'll check it out. Again, you can tell I really wanted to go into psychology before it was either a school teacher or psychology, but I wanted to go into research. Um, I didn't want to do the having clients type of psychology. All right. This manic, then, as in the case of the boy wonder, can be assumed to have gathered up available life force and suddenly channeled it along basic purpose lines, making a high level of concentration of life force. In the case of the pianist, his cleared force was well above the manic force. In the other case, currently in process, a level has been reached, which is approaching the former level and will surpass it by far. In the same way, an enthusiasm for a project will channel life force along some purpose line, and necessity will suddenly rob back from engrams enough power to carry an individual far, although he has no active manics whatever. Now we come to the heart of this matter, the pro-survival engram. It is a pseudo-survival like all engramic assists, a mirage which dissolves and leaves burning sands. I think I'm going to stop there because he's going into another idea. So I think this would be a good place to stop. Where were we? Okay, right there. All right. But yeah, what I am, it's a little hard to wrap my head around sometimes. Like, I'm kind of glad he got away from the life units. I get it. You know, if I look at it from a psychology point of view and how he means manic, and I like that he did use the Alexander the Great example because I had said it before he explained it. You know, those people, even though they were powerful and probably had a lot of money and anything they wanted, that doesn't necessarily mean they were happy. because they felt they always had to conquer and always had to be on guard to people that wanted to bring them down. So, and they ended up, a lot of those people burn out and die young. So I can see that. Not all, but many. So I kind of get what he's trying to say that life force is. Sorry, my notifications keep going off. Sorry. So I kind of understand it to a point, but he just took regular psychology ideas and he twisted them, changed it, the wording, and made it sound like Dianetics is scientific fact and it was studied. By who? Nobody. Find me a scientist that created Dianetics, or a doctor, or a psychologist, or any of that. L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer. He was not a scientist. And in the 40s, 46, 40, 45, 46, 47, how he studied was with Jack Parsons, who was an acolyte of Aleister Crowley, who was the wickedest man on earth at the time, the late 1800s, early 1900s. And that's how he studied. And it was a lot of intimate magic. And yet he tells his followers, you have to be married before you can do that. So it's not what he did. It's what he says. You have to do what he says. So, like I said, if they were really doing a real therapy session and auditing and getting rid of these traumas, he calls them engrams. We call them traumas. He calls it reactive mind. We call it the subconscious. He could have done some good, but he twisted it just to make money and control people. To give him money. Or be a slave labor. Because I have to go back. I would love to know, when I was reading how he started Dianetics and Scientology, even then, he wasn't completely hands-on all the time. He created people opened up the Dianetics centers, and people ran them and did all the work, and he was back somewhere else receiving money. So I don't know how often he traveled to those places. And then when he turned it into Scientology, again, you have centers all over the world. He's, living somewhere else. Just like David Miscavige, but he's not really even hands-on either. So he just sits back and shows up for events sometimes. He's hands-on at whatever base he's at, I guess, sometimes. But so he writes all of this stuff. He writes LRH, writes policies, send them down. And so that's where him learning to control people comes into play. Because he had to have some sort of control over people without actually being there to do it. And that's what he used his knowledge for. If he would have let auditing really work and didn't create such an unkind, stressful environment, we wouldn't be here right now. Hi, Susie. We wouldn't be protesting Scientology for abuse. We wouldn't have people escaping Scientology. If he would have just like Alexander the Great, just like other people that he's talking about, if they would have used their mind and their understanding of people for good, it'd been a whole new story. But LRH is doing just like Alexander the Great, just like Genghis Khan that he talked about in the book just now. He's taken the power they had over people, and has used it for his own ends and for evil purposes. That knowledge could go either way. It could have really helped people. It could have really helped people get to their trauma and release it for real if he hadn't had gone so overboard with this level they can get to of being able to control matter, energy, space, and time. If he would have just kept it Dianetics and not even gone into the major Scientology or all that stuff later, and he would have done what he says in this book, we wouldn't be here right now. There would be no SPTV. Because most survivors that have gotten out said there's no redeeming quality in Scientology because they don't use it, any of it, for good. Any of it. Not even their drug-free groups, not even their Narcanon, not even their ministries that go to disaster areas. Because even when they go there, they don't do anything. They don't really do anything. It's all for looks. It's really quite frustrating to read parts that make sense and that he could have used in the right way, but chose to be an evil SOB just to make money. All right. We have a lot more to this chapter. Where did I stop? Let's see. 317. And we still have to go to all right, we still have to go to 347. We're on 317. So we still have 30 pages. All right. So next week, if it works out, I haven't gotten with everybody yet, but you'll see if it'll either be Dianetics or I'm trying to get a panel together for a fibromyalgia stream just to talk about, so many of us have it, just to talk about it and ways that's helped, things have helped us, things that haven't, that kind of thing. Because I'm finding out that, and honestly, even if you just have chronic pain or you have another autoimmune disease, it'd probably still be a good chat for you to look at. So watch out for that. I'll be posting that hopefully this week when I nail everybody down. So y'all have a good week. Tomorrow I have a dental appointment, so I don't know when I'm going to be back protesting. We'll see how I feel. And I'm also trying to work on an intro and an outro. So trying to figure out what I want it to be like. So for now, it's just have a good week. I'll see you soon. Bye.